welcome to episode 48 of the Power Score LSAT podcast. This is John Denning coming at you quarantined in Los Angeles.
And this is Dave Killorn in Napa Valley, also quarantined.
Let's hope. Good for you. Strange days, my friend. Strange days.
It really is. And I think everybody knows that, so let's not belabor that point.
No, I think we've been gloomy enough. Let's belabor a more fun point, which is, what are you up to today as far as a cocktail? This afternoon as far as a cocktail?
Well, at least as far as what I'm drinking, I think you and I have both chosen something really similar, which is Quarantinis.
Yes, Quarantinis. We'll link where we actually got these two recipes from. It's part of the same list.
It really is. And I'm not a big martini person, so Quarantinis aren't my favorite. But I've chosen an espresso Quarantini because I like espresso, and you can throw a couple things in here that I think not only give you energy, but taste pretty good. So it came out all right. I wouldn't say it's the best drink I've ever had. However, if you like that heavier coffee flavor, I put a little extra Kahlua in this.
Attaboy.
And so I feel like it's a little jazzed up. It's got enough sweetness to it to satisfy.
Yeah, my big complaint about martinis is whoever designed that stupid glass is really not an engineer.
Why?
It's designed to slosh. Yeah, it's designed to spill in my lap.
Yeah, you tilt your arm like 10 degrees, and it's like, whoops, now you got drink on you.
No, it's like the opposite of a straw. I am having a grapefruit Quarantini, in part because I had grapefruit here, and, well, it was at hand. And also, I'm just trying to keep my immune system up with some vitamin C. I recommend it.
Good call, man. I used to have a grapefruit tree when I lived in South Carolina all the time.
I think I remember that.
I used to catch people stealing the grapefruits, and they'd always look really guilty, and then I'd say, it's okay, man, I don't eat grapefruit. I hate the taste of it.
Really? I didn't know that.
It's just a little too sour for me.
Interesting.
Dude, I am like one-track mind when it comes to alcohol. Put sugar in it.
Sweet. Yeah, this is supposed to have simple syrup in it, and of course, anyone who's listened to this at all, and you certainly know, I don't use simple syrup in drinks.
Why? Because you're so complex?
Because I'm sweet enough.
That's a lie.
Yeah, that's false. No, I just never have any, so this is just basically grapefruit and gin.
Well, that sounds all right for you. Gin's good. What's the song choice for today during this time of quarantine?
Well, yeah, I cut my teeth to these guys back when I was a slightly more rebellious youth. We're playing a Nirvana song, both of us, called "Stay Away." It's off the Nevermind album. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly, if you're not familiar with Nirvana, first off, shame on you. That is a seminal band, one of my favorites of all time. And I think this album is easily one of the greatest albums ever recorded.
You'll find no disagreement. We don't always see eye to eye on music, but yeah, this is absolutely foundational as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard it, and it just floored me. And when he died, I was so depressed about it because I was like, we just lost a musical genius.
Yeah. Regrettably, as of this recording, we're days away from the anniversary.
Yeah. So not to pause too long on that point, but if you haven't heard this song, Stay Away, it is just a furious attack.
Yeah.
And certainly in the time of social distancing, and really social distancing needs to be like, just stay at home. Stay Away is perfectly.
Yeah. Frankly, if you haven't heard this album, just run it through. It's not a long album. Run it through cover to cover. It's tremendous.
If you like rock and you like melodic rock, this is the album for you.
Melodic rock. That's well put.
Yeah, well, he's so catchy. I think that was actually Cobain's genius, was not that he was like technically a great guitar player, and we've seen a lot of those guys, but the fact that he would just come up with the catchiest melodies. It's very Beatlesque in a sense to me, because you listen to it and you find yourself humming it later.
Yeah, he was a master of power chords, of playing fifths. So
yeah, but it's just the way he put it together.
Yeah.
And I remember there's a story about Kurt and Courtney Love, and this was after the first album was out, and he was upstairs in a closet, because that's just kind of the guy he was, I guess, and he was playing the riff for Heart-Shaped Box, which is a song on their second album, or their second full album. And all of a sudden, Courtney Love heard it, and so she starts yelling at him from downstairs, "I want that riff." And he's like, "No."
No.
Then it became like the big single
Yeah.
off the next album. But
Courtney at the
yeah,
time, of course, the singer and guitarist is a stretch, but for the band Hole, which was another
she's
kind
not the main guitarist.
Nah, she's not
A
the only
band that
guitarist.
when at least Hole, at least when they were together and focused and not on drugs, was actually pretty good.
So 4% of the time.
One album.
Yeah.
One good album, man. I mean, a song like Violet, I think, is a great song. But anyway, let's move on
You
away
get a
from
deeper
this.
view of the canon here than I do, I'm afraid.
Well, we're getting into a hole over the music of Nirvana and Hole.
Indeed. Let's come back to present day. Talk a little bit about the LSAT world, because things are still very much in flux.
All righty, let's
Moving
do that.
parts. Do we have any updates from the last episode that we did, not too many days ago, on test cancellations or what's going to happen with the next few administrations?
Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
I think that's the shortest way to put it. We'll do a quick run through here. We still think that April is basically a dead issue. It's not going to happen. I think they're insane not to have announced it yet. I don't know what they're doing. That's the easiest way for me to characterize this.
Yeah, they've got another week before they've said we're hard deadlined. The 10th of April is when they say they're going to make an announcement by. Not necessarily on that day, but by then.
Yeah, given the number of states that have additionally locked down the ability to go out in public, we can now say with, I think, virtually 100% certainty, there will not be a full-scale public administration of the LSAT at the end of April. The only hope now would be an at-home version. And based on what I know about their operations and what I've heard, it sure seems like that's virtually impossible, especially now because you're talking less than 4 weeks and they've not announced any plans. So if they've got a Hail Mary here, they need to get on it right away. But personally, I don't think that's the case. I think they're just hedging and hoping and delaying and thinking to themselves, well, maybe. But I don't think this is the time for just maybe. This is the time to take leadership and be like, all right, we know it's not going to happen. Let's get everybody into a better mental state in terms of preparing for this. Call it. Just do the right thing. Call it now.
And I'm hoping as part of that cancellation announcement, which seems inevitable, they'll also address the issue of May, which currently there is no test scheduled for May, but I know a lot of people are holding out hope that they'll add one.
Yeah, I think it's possible that what happens is they may try to throw something in there. I don't think so. I think June is the one to really focus on. We talked about this in our last episode, so if you want to hear us go into detail about it, take a look at that or take a listen to that. And I think June as an in-person administration won't happen either.
Yeah, I don't either.
But let's hope that they have an at-home solution at this point.
Well, you and I both in California at the moment know that at least our current lockdown state and date is set for June 10th, which is 2 days after the current administration in June, which is June 8th. So even that, the idea that we're not supposed to leave the house until the 10th of June, which again makes me want to just jump off the roof and end it. I don't see how in the world they could say you have to be there on the 8th. It doesn't make any sense. Virginia has the same lockdown. I'm sure other states are beginning to implement.
Yeah, this is beating a dead horse.
It's silly.
There's so many people, there's so many schools that are like, nope, won't happen. You talk to, I know students who have called test centers and said, hey, are you having the LSAT? And they're like, no, we're closed.
Yeah, there's no chance.
LSAT.
We're not letting you in the building for it.
Yeah, so I don't understand this dance. Why are we dancing around the obvious? April's out. Just make it so.
Yeah, April, no May, June, doubt it. But that does at least give them enough of a window, especially by July, to consider at-home testing, which we've talked in detail about this, so I don't want to get too deep again. What do you think? Yeah. Do you think it's possible by, say, the July test date or even the end of June internationals, the 27th, 28th, they could have things going on at home?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
I think June is dicey, but it's possible. I think July is probably more realistic. I think if they push June back domestically, they might have a chance of being able to do it by the end of June.
Yeah.
And who knows? If we're lucky, they'll surprise the hell out of us. Boy, it's a big operation. It sure seems... I don't trust that.
Yeah, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Testy did say, under promise and over deliver. So maybe this is the first half of that. They're under promising.
That's the right way to do this. I just feel like this is not something that you can take a shot in the dark on. And they have a real problem because we know that other tests, GRE and GMAT, are focused on at-home testing. The difference is very simple, though. The GRE and the GMAT are now given individually. I can go in on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock and take that test, or a Thursday morning at 9 a.m. and take it. And so it's not these broad-scale thousands of people all at once. So to move a test like the GRE or the GMAT into an at-home circumstance is still just moving one person at a time.
Yeah.
So it distributes the load bearing that the system has to deal with. That is not how the LSAT is administered. I'm sure they're thinking to themselves, damn, I wish we had done it a different way.
Yeah.
But these are the choices that they made. And I understand why they made those choices, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So that's not a criticism. It's just a reality.
Sure. I mean, these are also tests that have been computerized online for years and years, and the LSAT's not even a year into it.
Exactly. So how do you put 15,000 people in roughly, a 6-7 hour period all taking the same test when it's never been done before? You don't.
Yeah.
You can't just do that in 3 or 4 weeks. And so the people have said, oh, they can just do an at-home option. I'm like, you are not thinking realistically. Can they do it later? Yes. Do they have the technical capability? Yes. Do they have the ability to turn it around in 3 weeks? No. And I think if they were to try, I would be in deep fear.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking. That was the word that occurred to me too, is I'd be terrified if they tried that.
Yeah, if something came up really quick and they're like, no, we're going to try an at-home option on the day of that test, I would be sitting there probably, I wouldn't be in a panic, but I would be like, please,
no,
please
but you and I would both
disaster.
turn our phones off, I can promise you.
I might start drinking at 6 a.m. as opposed to 6 p.m.
Yeah. It would not be an espresso martini for me that day. It would be a NyQuil martini, I think, where I would be like, I cannot.
And obviously we're joking.
Yeah,
I'll probably start drinking at 5 in the morning, not 6.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I was like, why'd you wait till 6?
In the East Coast, people are already up and trying to do this. Anyway.
Let's talk a little bit, though, about the GRE and the GMAT, because I know you and I have both discussed this together. If they can't run an LSAT until, let's say, July, which is probably where I would place my chip on this board, what does that mean for people who don't currently have a score, any kind of credential, but who want to try to apply right now?
Well, you could try the backdoor option of the GRE.
Yeah.
I mean, this crisis like this gives people opportunities. And if you are ETS, one of the things that you're certainly raising your hand over is, hey guys, we have an at-home option. It kicked in at the end of March. If you don't have an LSAT score and you want to apply to law school, here we go. The GRE is there for you.
Yeah.
So we'd mentioned this earlier, the fact that they had the ability to go at home and they were planning on doing so. So from a law school standpoint, that is an option. I don't love the fact that you don't have a whole lot of time to prepare.
Yeah.
But if you feel pretty good about that test and the content of it, you could at least get something in here in the next, 4 to 8 weeks that might allow you to apply if that's, what your timeline is.
Yeah, there's a possible runaround here, as it were, where, as you say, the back door, maybe the GRE becomes not just more acceptable, but a lot of people's only option. And the way they're doing at-home testing is interesting. The GRE, they're using a service, I suppose. I almost said a program, but that's too digitized, called ProctorU.
Yeah.
Which is someone, I believe, sits there live and actually watches you take the test over webcam via computer.
Checks in.
Yeah, exactly. And the GRE started this the 27th, I believe, of March, so they were pretty quick on it. LSAC is, and again, I don't blame them for this. They're just not going to be nearly so fast.
No, well, they've been doing a little bit of it with LSAT writing.
Yeah,
so they have some familiarity with this.
Yeah.
We know there's been problems. And so, we talk about the GRE as a backdoor, but that's just because right now the percentages of people using it are relatively small. In the future, it won't be a backdoor. And an event like this could actually help them, break down the front door.
I was honestly thinking the same thing. This could level the playing field simply based off of no other options.
Yeah. I know that's something that LSAC is aware of, and certainly they don't want to have happen. So I know they are working hard on the at-home option. If they have deigned to read the news anytime recently, they're probably thinking to themselves, this could be our future for a while.
Yeah.
We may not see another in-person LSAT for months and months and months.
And I was just thinking, it's like if the XFL could hold games while the NFL couldn't. It's a little what this
Is that
feels
the
like.
GRE?
Yeah,
The GRE is the XFL in
that's
this
right.
example.
Yeah, they could really, they could really get a foothold.
It's actually a pretty good comparison because the XFL has some things that are really interesting.
Mhm.
Like I love the kickoff thing that they do. I think the NFL will be well served to kind of take their kickoff formation, reduces injuries and so forth. Just like some of the stuff the GRE does with their computerized testing and being able to take it at any point.
Yeah.
Pretty attractive.
Well, that's the best analogy I could come up with on the spot.
It's pretty good for you, man. You're not a sports guy, so.
Oh, that's deeply insulting on levels I know you didn't intend. That's pretty
No,
good
it's
for
true.
you. Like, thanks, bud.
When it comes to sports around here,
No, you're definitely you're going to take the lead on that.
yeah.
Unless we're playing them, in which case, back up.
Look, if I need advice on something like high-level watches, there's nobody I would go to aside from you. You're the most knowledgeable watch person I've ever seen.
So
Same
sweet.
thing with like bourbon or whiskey. I'm like, look, this is not my wheelhouse. I know where my strengths are.
I know when I'm being patronized. It's fine.
I wasn't patronizing. I was impressed. I was like, that's a really good example.
Thanks, buddy. Have we heard anything else from LSAC yet? No, but again, we will at least by this time next week.
Yes, we have a week before the official deadline,
That's
which
right.
it's starting to appear more and more inexplicably that they are going to adhere to.
Well, let's hope they don't stall that long. Anyway.
No, and I know they don't love this criticism, but I'm really sorry. It's just reality. Wake up to reality, make the call now so that everybody can move on with their lives and not be thinking to themselves, I guess I still need to study for April. Because, what is that movie, Mean Girls? It's like, stop trying to make fetch happen. Stop trying to make April happen.
Lacey Chabert. Well done.
Oh my God!
I don't know
Can
sports,
you tell me?
but I do know Tina Fey movies.
Well, I'll tell you something. Here's a good quiz for you. What TV show was she on?
Oh, I know this. So it has a 5 in the title, I think.
Very good.
Scott
I
Wolf was part of it, and yeah, I know this. Oh well,
think
I'm
Campbell was in it.
Yeah.
Party of Five.
Party of 5. There you go.
She was, I think, the youngest kid in that, and then later on grew up.
I think it's just lately I haven't really thought of the word party. That's probably why I was blanking on half the title.
You get the 5. I'm super impressed by this.
It's 5 months inside, but what's a party? I get
What's
it.
a party?
What's a party?
All right, let's move on.
Yeah, well, we asked dumb questions. Let's look at some good questions. Student mailbag issue. I love doing these, by the way.
These are super fun, and I think we'll do a few more in the upcoming weeks simply to kind of like, give people the option of listening to some more content and hearing what other people are asking, especially in uncertain times. So this one will be a little bit more focused on like LSAT stuff and some things around test uncertainty and grades and so forth. And then I think next time we'll do some admissions stuff.
Yeah, I like that
Getting
idea.
a ton of comments and questions about that recently.
Let's
So
focus
what's
a
the
little
first
more
question here?
on the test today. Well, the first question that I think you and I both received via email was, and we tend not to read these in their entirety, and certainly we'll keep all these anonymous for anyone who's worried about their question coming up. But this was a student who took the test in January of this year, 2020. Didn't do so great, is looking to retake the test, and I think with a degree of reality in play, thinking September might be the date that they take the test again. The question really was about all this downtime. How do I stay productive? What do I do? Essentially, how do I study for a retake given that kind of lag time or that timeline?
I think that's a tough question.
It is a tough question. And there were some other parts to it as well. Like, I know what I struggle with. I don't want to lose sight of my strengths. How do I prioritize trying to improve the things that are giving me trouble without necessarily maybe getting a little rusty of the things where this is something I can lean on?
I think the first thing you have to acknowledge is if they're looking at September, which I think is realistic, you're looking at a 5-month horizon here. And so that's a long time. So the first thing is you're not going to be able to grind it out at high intensity for 5 months. You wouldn't want to. Right. It wouldn't be advisable anyway. So you have to create a schedule that allows for, kind of like a steady, slow attack on this. And the thing I often say about, test preparation for an exam like the LSAT is that it is like the drip of water against a stone. If you do a little bit every day and constantly work at it, you will bore a hole in the stone. If you try to take a big bucket and be like, I'm going to do 10 hours on Saturday, and then you don't do anything until the following Saturday and you do another 10 hours, that's like throwing a big pail of water on the stone. It just doesn't have the same effect. You have to be consistent and relentless in this. I'd rather see you do 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, than to do 10 hours on a Saturday.
Yeah, this is way more tortoise than hare as it ultimately boils down.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example as well. So the first thing is realize that you got a long horizon here and that you're going to need to be steady and consistent. The second thing is, and this is what I'm really missing in this question, is I need so much more information. So a lot of times people will ask us questions, and my first response is, I've got questions for you. I know you asked me a question, but I'm going to answer your question with a question.
With 15 questions.
Yeah. And so that usually comes down to is how long have you studied? Where are your strengths and weaknesses? What have you studied? How many tests have you taken? What does your schedule look like? How are you feeling about this test in terms of whether or not you're burned out? Because all of that information allows us to look at your situation and think, okay, you should do this or you should do that.
Right.
And so in this case, I actually wrote a lengthy blog post about this called Retaking the LSAT, What to Do Differently to Change Your Score. And I think that's always the base of what I tell people, which is that, well, you're going to have to do certain things. Like you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. You need to go back. You need to check the tracker that you've used to show what's right and wrong and look for patterns. You need to do more tests. You need to try to teach this material to other people if you can do so. So the thing here is you've got to assess the past in order to assess the future. You need to know what it is that you have done. You need to sit down and make a really clear-headed, because sometimes people are like, well, I did better on that than it showed. I'm like, don't use fantasy, use reality. If you went 10 out of 23 on a logic game section, don't tell me, well, I could have done 16. I was like, well, when you do 16 out of 23, then tell me. If it's 10 right now, let's analyze why it was 10 and try to fix that. So the short answer to that is there's a ton of different things you can do to start with studying a retake, but the first step is to go back and find out where you're weak and attack that.
Yeah, and we've discussed this in a prior episode too, which we can link to, about like essentially how to review your practice test results or how to review your study results. That's a lot of what this is. What does a practice test really tell you as you look at it after the fact? In terms of priorities, in terms of opportunities, in terms of actual strengths and weaknesses versus fantasized ones, as you put it.
Yeah. Well, this person had said, I'm aware of my shortcomings, but I don't want to lose sight of my strengths. Well, completely. That's what the whole process is, a matter of attacking weaknesses while making sure you don't lose ground on the things that you're already good at.
Yeah. One of the things I know you and I both really appreciate about this test is that it is so skill-based as opposed to memory-based.
Yeah.
No one suddenly forgets how to ride a bike. It's a skill. It's not memory. So this is a test where I feel like, once I'm pretty good at linear games, you could take them away from me for a month, and I'd come back and be like, yeah, linear games. I know how to do those.
I think that's actually the point, is if you are good at something, you don't have to study it every day.
Right.
But come back to it with frequency. Every week, make sure you do a couple linear games. Be like, all right, that's right. I still remember everything. I still know what I'm doing. You maintain fluency with what it is that is needed to do well on certain types of questions, whether it's linear games, whether it's assumptions, whether it's, heavily science-oriented reading comprehension.
Perfect. That's actually the example I was going to use, so well done you.
Well, yeah.
It's also motivating, frankly, and let's not overlook the fact that looking at a 5-month horizon here for September, nobody looks at that and they're like, sweet, 5 more months of LSAT prep. I don't think. I'm sure there's some psycho out there who's like, only 5 months? Oh,
there are people who exist that way.
Yeah.
That's all right.
To be able to come back to something that it feels comfortable or rewards you in a way with some regularity, it just kind of keeps your energy and your motivation up, your enthusiasm. So I would encourage it for that as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next question.
Cool.
Which
you
is...
you take it.
You want me to? All right.
Sure.
This question revolves around trying to prepare with uncertainty, which is obviously quite relevant right now. And the question is, my state just locked us down until June 10th, which is 2 days after the next scheduled test. That's a really good sign that test isn't happening.
By the way, this question came to me on Twitter from a student in California. So
yeah,
I was like, yep.
We understand.
I see you.
We know how this actually works. So this is June, though. This isn't even April. And I love the fact that we're still, debating whether April will happen. Side note, it won't.
Are we though? Right.
Yeah, we're not debating it. We know the answer. And this is talking about June. And of course, this is one of the things we're trying to avoid is questions about June. But the people are people. They're going to ask about what happens next. That's very natural. So California and other states are locked down until after the scheduled June date. Do you recommend engaging or waiting to see LSACs move? Is it naive to think the machine knows, quote, my, unquote, situation?
I like that last bit. The machine knows.
First off, it is totally naive. It is utterly naive to think the machine knows anything or cares anything about you.
I suppose it depends on how she meant it. And again, I'll keep it anonymous as to who sent me this, but I just like that phrasing
there.
Yeah, I was a big fan of
the phrasing is fantastic. I don't trust the machine at all. And, it's naive to think they know your personal situation. The greater controller of the machine is well aware of what's going on in this country. You'd have to have your head in the sand or be, on a Colorado river rafting trip for a month.
Or Georgia's governor.
He just discovered
most of my family is in Georgia right now, and the fact that he said just this week that it was only 24 hours ago we learned asymptomatic people could spread this. I was like, oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
The CDC is in Georgia. They announced that on like February 4th. What are you doing?
Yeah, well, 24 hours, 24 days, 2 months. Who knows? It's all the same, right?
Sure.
Anyway.
What is time really?
The elastic perception that we all have of the so-called reality.
Oh my God. Anyway.
Take the blue pill.
The machine, I think the machine kind of knows what's happening. I don't think again, it depends on how we define the machine. Does LSAC look at individuals here and make decisions?
No.
No, I think this is going to be a wholesale conclusion.
They don't want to open this can of worms.
Yeah.
So, knowing that that's the case, obviously you still can't assume that they won't have a alternative plan in place. Maybe we get into June and there is the ability to take this test at home, which means you're going forward with your LSAT at that point. Mm-hmm. So at least as far as the preparation, what I would continue to do here, because it won't hurt you. Putting in time right now isn't going to hurt you later. So it's not like this is lost energy. And I think that's really important. Some people are very frustrated because they're like, I don't know when the test is. I'm like, I agree. That sucks. And it's unprecedented for people taking this test to have to deal with this kind of situation. But knowing that that's the case, keep on studying at a steady pace.
Yeah.
Don't go like low level. Don't go super intense. Just keep on at what you would consider to be your normal kind of like aggressive pace for preparing. And the reason is anytime you put in now will benefit you later. It accrues to you. It accumulates and it builds up. Now, if it turns out that June doesn't happen and you get pushed to July, well, then you'll take a break. You'll have that, but you'll have built this base. It's like climbing a mountain. Once you've climbed halfway up, you don't just jump off the side and the next time start to come right back up. You can continue climbing from that point.
Yeah, there's still a summit in sight. You're just getting closer to it. We've made this point before. I've said this to students all the time. Look, if you can just go to bed a little better than how you woke up, that's a great LSAT day. So people have asked me, they're like, well, look, if this gets pushed back a month from my planned date, should I wait a month to start? I'm like, are you crazy? No, that's an opportunity. Start now.
Start early, start now, work hard. I'd rather have somebody slam it out at the beginning or the middle of their LSAT preparation as opposed to taking it easy and then trying to slam it out at the very end because cramming does not work for this test. So just take that with the biggest grain of salt in terms of understanding this. Be like, all right, I need to understand it.
I've never, ever heard a student say to me, I wish I had studied less or I wish I'd had less time. Not once in all the years of doing this have I ever heard that come out of somebody's face. I hear instead like, oh God, if I just had one more week, or I wish I'd looked at another circular game or a pattern game, or I wish we'd had one more tutoring session. I hear that daily almost.
or I should have started earlier, or I should have worked harder.
Yeah.
Those you hear regret. You rarely hear somebody go out, get grade score, and be like, "Gee, I didn't need to do that much work."
Yep, I overdid it for this 174. Never.
Let's continue on.
All right. There were a couple of questions that came in here in a related vein, so I think we can probably lump these two together. And this is a little more about like the admissions side of things, although we'll have an episode, as Dave said, soon on admissions proper. These were both about transferring schools. So where you start at one law school and then at some point through your journey there, jump ship and go to a different one.
Yeah, usually between your 1 and 2L year is when you see that happen.
Right.
Unless you're Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in which case you go from Harvard to Columbia for your last year.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, look at you. All these
There's
years.
a movie about...
Still taking me to school.
Well, I just saw the movie on her that's on like HBO or something, which is funny because the other night I was like, we should do an episode where we just talk about like cool movies and TV shows from the past that people could stream and watch right now that relate to law school, the legal world. And I thought the movie, which has got Felicity Jones playing RBG, I thought it was good.
The notorious RBG.
Yeah, notorious RBG. But at one point, she says to the dean of Harvard, who apparently was a real piece of work, he's like, "Oh, I'm glad to see you're putting your Harvard education to good use." And she's like, "Yeah, I learned that at Columbia." I'm like, that's an excellent rip on Harvard. Anyway.
May she live forever. The first question specifically was, what do you think about transferring law schools? And then we got some deeper information. And this was someone who was in Southern California, wanted to stay there, planning to apply and potentially attend. Do you want to list off some of the schools maybe where they were talking about the 1L year?
Let's go through the actual scenario here.
Okay. And
then we'll open up that conversation by first talking about the option of transferring and then talking about this specific situation.
I like it. So the specific schools that were mentioned, Southern California, 1L starts, were Cal Western at, am I saying this right, Argosy?
Argosy.
I never know where the emphasis goes. The University of Laverne and the University of San Diego, which I am saying correctly. And then after the first year, transferring to possibly UCLA or UCI, both Southern California schools.
John, it's not Leviosa, it's Leviosa.
All right, Harry. You're a wizard, Harry.
I love those books and movies.
I know you do.
They're fantastic. Anyway, so let's first off talk about transferring.
Sure.
Obviously, transferring is a option that is on the table if you perform well. However, I oftentimes get questions from people who say just this: I'm thinking about transferring. And this is before they've even started law school.
Yeah.
And I always say the same thing. That's great. And that's a worthy goal if that's what you want to do. However, my advice on transferring is always the same. Don't assume that it will be possible, because you just don't get the right to transfer. Like if you don't do well in law school, you're not going to be able to transfer. And so you are, quote, unquote, stuck at the school that you were at. So my first advice about transferring is make sure you go to a school that you would be happy to graduate from, because that way, no matter what happens, you'll be okay. Now, a lot of times people are like, well, my numbers, I know I'm really intelligent. I know I'm going to really do well in law school. And so, look, I don't have to worry about that. And based upon many years of experience, I will say to you, right, so you're going into a meat grinder that you know nothing about, that you've never really dealt with before. You don't really have a clear understanding of how things are graded or what they're really grading you on, but you're sure that you're going to come out at the top of your class. I appreciate your confidence. It's the kind of confidence that I would have. However, I know a lot about law school. How much do you know about it? And that sounds like a really jerk way of putting it. And it probably is. However, when someone's saying to me, I'm going to go ahead and go to a school that I'm not really happy with because I'm going to transfer out, the reality is you're putting a huge gamble on the fact that you're going to be able to adapt to law school very quickly. You're going to understand the grading. And then when it comes down to exams, which is really where it's all at, that you're not going to have a bad day. You're not going to be sick. You're not going to be tired. You're not going to be stressed. You're betting that nothing will go wrong at all. And I find that to be a really dangerous approach.
it's hugely dangerous and presumptuous. You're betting sometimes the literal house on the fact that things are going to go your way well enough that where you start isn't where you finish. That is, um, it's a chance I could never recommend someone take. So what I always tell people, and what I told this student in response via email was, look, it happens. Again, Richard Gere climbs the thing to Julia Roberts. These moments probably exist, but don't ever bank on the fact that you're going to find yourself the pretty woman, Like, you may just end up.
No. It's the other way around.
You may just stay
in
on the
that
corner.
movie. He didn't find her so much as, he was the rich kind of like mogul.
That's true.
Everybody's like, you got Julia Roberts. And I'm like, well, not to be crass, she was actually the street worker.
Yeah, she climbed that ladder, I suppose, more than he did. However, regardless of how that metaphor works, if you go into a school thinking this is just a jumping off point for me, this is my entry into law school proper or broadly, but I know I'm going to end up somewhere more vertical, that's a real, like, as you say, it's not just a gamble, it's a huge risk. And I know that's the same thing as a gamble, but to me, the consequences of this can be so severe. You can find yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt with a degree you didn't want, or from an institution you aren't happy about.
Well, take a look at this specific example here. So he wants to stay in Southern California, and the three schools that are selected here, Cal Western, Laverne, and San Diego, are very different schools in terms of like even your ability to transfer out of them. And then notice what the goal is.
Mm-hmm.
These are to go from schools that are largely not that highly ranked to UCLA and UCI, schools that are ranked relatively highly here. So there's this presumption I'm going to go from schools that are a little bit down the line or a lot down the line to somebody that's really like very high, top 20 level type schools. Mm-hmm. That's a huge leap. And I remember when I saw this, I was like, oh boy, that is not the platform that you typically are able to jump out of, especially Cal Western and Laverne. No knock on those schools, but the idea of transferring into, say, a top 20 school isn't going to be a daily occurrence there. It's not going to be normal.
Right.
And it was funny because we were talking about this earlier, and I went out and I took a look at some of the transfer numbers for these schools. Mm-hmm. And so, transfer numbers are usually, about a year behind to 2 years behind. I looked at UCLA. Number of students that transferred out of UCLA, only 4. Mm-hmm. 4 people were at UCLA left to go to other schools, which could have been a school that, was more highly ranked. They might have gone to Harvard, or it might have been to, deal with a personal situation, which is, I think, something you described where somebody's like, well, my spouse moved to DC, so I'm transferring to Georgetown.
A family member on the other coast got sick, and I've got to go help. There's a lot of things that could occur to force a transfer in a more lateral direction.
Yeah. Now, transfers into UCLA, 34. So UCLA is bulking up on transfers. They're feasting on the transfers. Georgetown's a school that's also known for doing this, to the extent that DC area schools are kind of pissed at Georgetown for sucking up so many of their quality students. But in this case, it's basically the 509 report that I'm looking at from UCLA. They were nice enough to actually list the schools where they got students. And when you take a look at Laverne and Cal Western, they didn't take any students from those two schools. So right away, that's a good indication. And this is just 1 year, but 0 out of 34 for those two. San Diego got 2 out of 34. It was different schools. It was UCI, for example, fed 6 people into UCLA. Pepperdine, I think, fed 5 into them. So local schools that are higher on the chain that they know pretty well because they get a lot of applicants from that. So when you look at this, don't just assume that you're going to be able to transfer. You don't know if your grades are going to be good enough. You don't know if you're really going to fit well with law school. And so consequently, that's a big fear right there. And then secondly, make sure that the school that you're looking at as the so-called jumping off spot is actually a school that feeds into schools like the ones you're looking at in the long run.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, it's a really dangerous equation. And I always say the same thing. I'm like, don't go there unless you are going to be okay graduating, because there is just no guarantee in this process. And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. There you go. The other question about transferring is very similar and is probably largely answered by what we just did, but it's a mailbag issue, so I'll mention it. It's a student looking to take the test in April, to which I've already apologized to her about the fact that that's not going to happen. The wonder test, I believe she called it, which is pretty funny. I'd call it more the fantasy test. But regardless, when this student does get an opportunity to take it, if she were to be able to get, say, around a 170 with and again, her words, lackluster GPA of 2.9, would I be best off going to a school with that, or again, should I just start anywhere and plan to transfer? And I think we've just addressed it.
We have addressed it, although she's got a bit of a more specific situation because she's a splitter.
Mm-hmm.
If she goes out and she posts a 170, let's just use that because it's an easy number.
Sure.
But it would be similar if it was 168. She says high 160s. A 170 and a 2.9, the 2.9 is a problem because anything under 3.0 is just a challenge for law schools. But she's in a position where that 170 has value. And this is why splitters a lot of times get attention that is unexpected by them at first. It's because they can use that high LSAT score. High GPAs are relatively common. High LSAT scores, less so. So they can take someone who has a 4.0 and a lower LSAT score, bring in this person with a 170 to 2.9, and kind of create two average type of students for their purposes. And that's one of the values of being a splitter is that you bring something that is above the 75th percentile median for these schools. Now, in her case, or if it her or him, whoever it is.
It was a her.
Okay. In her case, the transfer idea, we already talked about that, so I'm not going to hit that point again. But it may very well be that she could end up at a school that's fairly decent with those numbers, better than she might have initially thought, because you're thinking, well, my 2.9 kills me. Well, as you go down the line, a 170 at a lower ranked school all of a sudden looks really good to them. They're like, we can deal with your GPA. And if they're confident that you can do the work academically, they'll bite. So then she could either go to a school that might be, good enough for her there and then possibly transfer. But again, don't go to the school unless you think that you're going to be happy graduating from that school.
Completely, as we just discussed. So, and I sent her a note of encouragement in response to this. I was like, I know that 2.9 is probably terrifying for you as you embark on this. Hit the number of your LSAT, and you and I have talked about this in previous episodes. There's one thing you have left to improve your chances. That's your test score. You have to crush the LSAT. Do whatever it takes.
Oh, yeah. There's stories of people out there who have like 170 something and a 3.0, and they get into schools and you're like, how'd they get in there?
Right.
Because it doesn't look like they would. But it's because one number's above the median, one number's below the median, and that has kind of like a compensatory effect.
Yeah. And when you split in that direction, of course, with the LSAT being your shining star, the thing above the median is the more important thing.
Yeah. When you reverse it and you have a really high GPA and a really low LSAT, the road is tougher.
Yes.
Not impossible, because high GPAs have their value too. If you're like, I'm a 4+ something, but it's easier with the LSAT because there are fewer really high LSAT scores.
Yeah. Well, speaking of GPA, I know you've been asked a lot about this, and part of this is based on the current situation, about how schools are currently, and LSAC proper is currently calculating GPAs, especially with the weirdness of these final semesters for a lot of people.
Yes. The fear factor.
Man. It's a good Joe Rogan reference. We're getting some good references in today. There's a Mean Girls, a Pretty Woman. Solid.
XFL. It's good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this pass fail kind of thing.
Right.
That's occurring. And we're going to separate this from the law school discussion, because law schools have been going through this as well. There've been a lot of talk about schools that are either going pass fail versus having grades.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the schools that kept grades are getting just barraged by their students who are furious over this. So this is not about law school classes. This is about undergraduate institutions that are switching their grading system because everybody's gone online to a pass, not pass, or pass fail kind of situation. So in this case, I thought this question, it struck me as strange when I saw it. And I'm still confused as to where this came from. But the question says, I've heard that many schools consider a course where a student has picked a grading option of pass, not pass. Then in those cases, the law schools will consider the pass equivalent to a C for GPA calculations. Is that true? No.
No. Happily, no.
Next question. Okay, kidding. It is not. First off, law schools don't make a GPA calculation. It's CAS,
Right.
it's LSAC service that actually does it. And you can go online and take a look at how they deal with pass, no pass classes. They don't include them. So what's happening here, for better or worse, is that this term, whether it's a semester or quarter or whatever, if you are put into a pass-fail, pass-no pass situation, it's not going to be included in your GPA. For some people, that's great because they're like party. And for other people, it's like, damn, I was hoping to bring up my GPA even further. So this isn't like, there's not a value judgment being made. It's just that LSAC doesn't include these grades. So there's that. And then LSAC also made an announcement recently where they said they are going to put a note in the file of applicants from this term that says, hey, they didn't get grades. Keep that in mind. The COVID situation has arisen. Schools went online. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
As if anyone could forget it.
Exactly.
But whatever.
No kidding. We sat in and listened to a bunch of deans earlier this week, in fact, talk about, look, we're hyper aware of the fact that there's a huge degree of strangeness right now. No one is going to look at this semester the same way that we would look at 2018 or hopefully 2021.
Yeah. So they're going to give you a pass, a free pass in the pass-fail.
Right. I think it has been the case prior that they have looked at fail in a pass-fail and treated it as a 0 or an F.
Yeah, if you do fail, then they know what that is.
Right. Or don't pass, as it were. But yeah.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary situation. And of course, law schools are going to be more flexible. Once LSAC appropriately cancels the April LSAT, then you'll see movement on like deadlines. You'll probably see some policy updates. They clearly are waiting right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, schools know that students are scared and anxious and uncertain. That is not to the school's benefit. So I think they're going to continue to come out and be like, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Extend deadlines, treat you this way, make these kinds of exceptions. I think we're going to see a lot of that in the next 2 weeks, frankly.
Exactly. So that's good news, though. You don't have to worry about this as a concern like, oh my gosh, I got forced into this pass-fail scenario. Now I'm going to get a 2.0 GPA for that semester. Nope. It's not how CAS will actually calculate it. And the law schools will look at that master report and they will use that CAS GPA, so it will not be included. You'll be good to go.
Yeah, perfect.
Don't fail a class, though, because that will be negative.
Do not,
no
yeah. If you've got pass-fail, pass. Please pass. But don't worry about them assigning a number to it. You'll be fine.
All right.
Let's get a little bit back into the test itself. And I think this will take us full circle for this discussion. One of the questions that came in is one of my favorite questions and something that I know you and I are both fascinated by, which is the use or reuse of specific test content. Specifically, here's the question. The other day, I took Prep Test 60 and realized that one of the RC passages was also in the January 2020 test. This was the passage about art forgery. The first question was, is this a rare occurrence, or are repeats from older tests on the current test either common or does it even really happen? Because there is confusion about, am I imagining this or did it happen? And then there's questions about what happens on non-disclosed versus public tests, etc. So, let's talk a little bit just to clear the air about test content reuse.
Okay. Does it happen?
Sure.
Yes. Has it been happening more frequently recently? Yes.
As one would expect, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this previously. In one of our test recaps, we were like, this was a reuse of a prior passage. What's going on? And we address that. They're being forced to create so much content that it makes a lot of sense to go back to something they felt like they had more room to work with. So we're seeing more and more of it. I think it's going to be more likely on non-disclosed tests because it's hard to confirm if it was identical or whether something actually had changed. So have we heard of this happening before? Yes, we have. Do I like it? Absolutely not. I hate it. You should not. I had students who were like, I just did that test like 4 days ago. So when I saw it, I couldn't believe it. But obviously, I knew what to do with it. They had an advantage. So I hate it. I think it's complete unleveling of the playing field, where some people who had studied those tests recently have an advantage over people who studied them long ago or not at all. So the question continues on to say, would it be advantageous to study all the prep tests, or at least familiarize yourself with all the RC passages? Well, yeah.
Of course.
That would be true regardless. And I understand the intent of this question is to be like, could I familiarize myself and then see it? The chances of that happening are very low. However, it's still in your best interest to familiarize yourself, because you need to learn as much about the LSAT as you possibly can. And the more passages you do, the better off you are. If there's a secondary benefit, kind of like an extra lottery draw, where all of a sudden, hey, and then you see it on the real test, fabulous.
Yeah. I believe what specifically happened here, and again, I didn't take the January test, so it's hard for me to say with absolute certainty, but I believe what happened here is they may have reused the content of a passage, but asked different questions about it.
Yes.
So this was, if you're thinking to yourself, like, I'm going to see a game on a real test that I've already practiced, probably not. But could they reuse the stimulus, let's say, from a logical reasoning question? Sure.
Definitely.
And that has to, unfortunately, be the case, given what we've heard. It seems almost inevitable that they're doing that.
I think RC is the easiest one for them to mine this way.
Yeah, I do too.
But you make a really important point there. It wasn't that the questions were identical. It was that the passage was basically the same.
Apparently was the same. And again, it's hard. It's a non-release test. Neither of us took it. So we're having to do this secondhand, or hear of these things secondhand. And we know that LSAC loves a topic, but not necessarily the exact same discussion on it. That bee waggle dance thing that they did, like, I don't know, 3 tests out of 5 in a row or something.
Yeah. Bee dance, serotonin, dinosaurs. I mean, we can go down the list of topics that they're like,
WB
we
Dubois.
love them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in a situation like this, the interesting thing is you don't know if it's exact or not. People claim that it is, but do they know if the 13th sentence was changed?
Right.
They don't. And so it's not so much that you study LSAT questions in order to hope that you see them again. It's that you hope to understand the form and structure so that you understand how they attack you, so that no matter what they do next time, you're prepared.
Precisely.
Yeah. Excellent. Let's go to the last question here.
Cool. Take it.
Which is about the fairness of at-home testing. A question I like.
Me too.
It says, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the podcast regarding the fairness of offering in-home administrations. Considering that individual testing rooms are considered an accommodation, and I certainly would have preferred one, not to mention that standard distractions that come with packing 10 people into a small room together exist, it's hard to imagine that someone taking an in-home test is not at a significant advantage. So,
yeah, I think you and I are probably going to see eye to eye on this as well, which is always a nice way to wrap things up.
Let's hear your opinion on this.
My opinion on this is, of course, it'd be great to take a test in your own house.
Yeah. Unless Wilbur the cat just decides to cough up a hairball during the exam.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah. Mom bursts in with breakfast. Yeah. Or the roommate starts playing rock music upstairs. Nirvana upstairs, right?
AC/DC.
Yeah. So there could potentially be distractions based just off of almost the comfort level in a weird way. But yeah, nobody wants to get up and go to a test center and sit in some tiny desk with strangers. No, of course not.
Yeah, there's an obvious familiarity benefit. I'm surrounded by the trappings of comfort.
Yeah, and in the exact same seat where I've been studying, doing the thing I've been studying for. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally an advantage. However, the question that came in after that is, would LSAC, quote, correct, unquote, scores if they notice an uptick for such an administration? And I think there's a very simple answer to that. No.
It's a simple answer with more nuance to it than maybe the word suggests.
You didn't like my bluntness.
I didn't. Only because I'm the person who wrote this person back, and I tried to be a little more nuanced with it, which is to say, look, the tests already do this. There already is a system in place to quote unquote correct for any kind of variance in overall outcomes, which is the scoring scale. So that was kind of my take. First of all, I don't think it would be significant or notable enough that you'd be like, oh, wow, this is 4 points higher than we thought on average. No.
The variance would not be that much.
No. And that was another point that I made in my reply. It was like, I don't think you're going to see much of a variance, if any. But also, if there was any, there is a way for them to inherently correct for it.
If they felt that it was really out of line, they can adjust the scoring scale.
Precisely.
The question is what's really out of line? Is a 0.3 increase really out of line? No. Remember that percentiles are calculated on a 3-year rolling basis. That's hundreds of thousands of test takers. So putting in a single pool of 10 or 15 or 20,000 people doesn't have a really demonstrable effect. So even if you have a test that produces more high scores than expected, it's buried in this noise and volume of data that it really diminishes its impact. If these were individual tests that were percentiled, it would be a totally different situation. But then it would not be the same LSAT. They would completely operate the back end of scoring and scaling differently. So we don't live in that world. We live in a world where everybody gets pooled year after year, and they create that kind of rolling scenario. So you are fighting, or at least kind of working with 3 years of data, not just an individual test. And that completely changes the dynamics of what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the natural question or even objection to that would be, but don't those 15 or 20,000 people get such a specific or unique advantage that it should be calculated more individually? That's not rhetorical. I actually want to hear your thought.
You want to hear my thought?
Of course I do.
Well, first off, since I don't think the advantage is going to be that big anyway, I don't think it would ever come down to it. What you're really asking is, if something happened that was extraordinarily out of line, would they address it? Now, they'll never answer this question because they're not going to, it's a black box. They don't want to tell you how they actually really do things.
Honestly, a yes or a no to them is a black mark. It looks bad. If, like, of course we would address it. It admits to the potential issue. No, we'd never address it. It admits to something worse, I think.
Yeah, they're not going to address this. So in that sense, what we're doing is we're using common sense and our knowledge of how they operate. If something was truly extraordinarily out of kilter, yeah, I think they would. I think they'd start adjusting the scale, and I think you've seen in the past where they've done things like that before, where they're like, oops, 177 is impossible. But think for a moment how small of an adjustment that is. We killed off a 177. Or, however they might manipulate it. 172 is impossible.
You had to get 2 more questions right compared to last time. These are very, very incremental things.
Yeah, these are such small changes that they could do that, and really, I often think about them as the refinishers. They know what's going to happen. They've produced, the piece that is virtually done. And then at the very end, they do all the fact checking, all the statistical analyses, and then they polish and refine it if needed. And does that happen a little bit? Yeah, there's a little bit of a massage that goes on. But by and large, like 95 to 98%, they already know what's happening. So little adjustments like that wouldn't be that difficult for them to make. And would it be a radical adjustment? No.
No, I don't think so. Not unless they're faced with a radical, unexpectedly radical outcome. Which, again, I don't think at-home testing is going to produce. It comes with its own host of issues as well, of course. Imagine sitting there on a webcam the whole time knowing somebody might just be staring at you. That's weird. There's elements of at-home testing, depending on how they choose to do it, if they ever do, that to me are uncomfortable in a way.
Oh, yeah. Your roommate's playing AC/DC?
There it is.
Back in Black is like blaring out, and they're like, stop it.
I might be jazzed up. I'd probably request it. Yo, dude, crank it.
I wouldn't personally. I mean, I love the song, but I do not want like heavy bass-oriented music playing in the next room while I'm trying to focus.
That's a good song for when the stock market recovers. That's what I'm looking for. We'll dust that one off hopefully soon.
It's going to be a while.
I know.
Anyway, yeah, I don't think much of an adjustment will be made, and I don't think there's going to be that big of a difference in the first place. So I don't think it's necessary. It's going to be another normal LSAT when they do that.
Yeah.
It'll offset. Any advantages will be offset by some disadvantages.
Potentially, yeah. There's also the fact that we don't even know how they would administer it. Do you have to have a tablet? Will they send you a tablet? Can you use your actual computer, laptop or desktop? Like, there's 1,000 questions we don't know the answers to for that.
Yeah, I have to assume that it would be platform agnostic, and you could take it on a tablet or a computer or desktop, laptop, what have you. But again, has that been confirmed? No. Have they said anything other than we're looking at it? No.
Classic.
And that,
Classic.
I think, yeah, that's typical. And like I've said many times before, I appreciate their newfound interest and attention to communicating. We never got this before in the past, and I think it's awesome, and I will compliment them till the end of time for this. At the same time, I will also push them to be even more communicative and open about these things.
Yeah.
I think that calls it, though.
I do too. I like that you mentioned that we're going to do one of these soon on admissions. That is certainly the case, because we've been getting a lot of questions, and this time of year is natural to get a lot of questions about, again, admissions decisions. If you're awaiting that episode, maybe you're trying to make some decisions right now, go check out the podcast episode that we did on scholarship versus prestige. I think it contained not only a lot of examples, but a lot of good advice.
Agreed. Any final comments?
I mean, aside from the obvious, which is stay safe, be smart. We'll get through this together. And if you have questions like the ones we've answered here, now's a great time to ask them, because we're trying to stay as in touch with people as we possibly can.
Yes, stay away.
Stay away.
But let me just second, what Jon just said. I hope everyone out there is staying safe. Hopefully things are working fairly well for you, even as you adjust, and you're in our thoughts. So if there's anything we can do to help out, please let us know. We'd be happy to assist.
Yeah, we're here for you guys.
All right. If you get a chance, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else you may find it. Give us a rating as well if you don't mind. Only 5 stars accepted, however. And if you have any questions, and they will be answered in an upcoming episode, hopefully, please send those to lsatpodcast@powerscore.com. On behalf of Jon and myself, thank you so much for listening. Have a great and safe week. Take care.